All right, so today we're doing a little something different on the show. We're actually going to give you an inside look at one of our leadership meetings because one of the things that we find is that, it's all good to just talk about things in theory, but when you start to see things in practice, sometimes it helps you understand a little bit more. So this one is definitely for accountants if you're running an accounting firm or you're just in the profession of accounting, and for business owners because it gives you a chance to see, hey, these are the type of conversations you want your accountant to be having internally. You want your accountant to be thinking about. So you want to tune in to today's conversation. So stay tuned. All right, so let's jump right into the meeting. So, all right, one of the things that I have been thinking about for the team as we've been expanding and as we've been taking on more customers and we're starting to expand our reach is really this trust factor. And
Hmm.
I think that that one becomes very important for us, um, because I do think as a whole, from an industry standpoint, people are people are losing trust and they're losing faith in other people, because all the stuff that's coming out, the shady stuff. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is like how much how the success of our business depends on, can we gain the trust and respect and uphold the trust of our clients as well as the trust of each other internally. Any initial thoughts on that?
Um, I think for me, I agree. I think even when I think about just running a company and just even between employees, right? Trust is a big factor. I think right now we're seeing a lot of situations where, like, for example, they talk about the whole quiet quitting, where a lot of people are leaving companies because, they feel like, or they're doing the bare minimum because, hey, they feel like they no longer trust the company to follow through and do what they said that they were going to do, or promises are made and promises aren't kept, or a lot of times things are said for just saying sake. So, I mean, I think trust is a big factor, and for me the biggest area where I see it, or where I think about trust is, and I don't want to kind of get too far ahead, but I think really when it comes to just doing what you say when you're going to do it. But I don't want to like jump ahead because I know you had some other items you wanted to cover, but I think for me that's the bigger thing.
Yeah, so I mean, this conversation is going to be, available to the rest of the people within our company and the rest of the people in our organization. So, there's a couple of things I think from a leadership standpoint that you and I want to make sure the rest of the team understands, as well as I think just also being transparent about some of the stuff we're working on ourselves.
Yeah.
Because I do think when I think about, working in organizations, I will say is when I got a chance to see the reality or the real side of the leaders that I work with and saw that they were, hey, they had some ideals that they were aiming for. They weren't quite there, but they were working towards it. It gave me a lot more respect for them as leaders.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think transparency is a big thing. So I would say, like, specifically for us, I think we we run a company that is crucial. Like, trust is crucial for us. I think whenever it comes to dealing with people's money or things that are related to people's money, money is an area where a lot of people feel vulnerable. A lot of people may not feel as secure. A lot of people don't feel like maybe where they are, where they want to be, or their business personally, and on the business side, where their business is where they want their business to be. And so I think for us, the biggest area is really people have to trust us to want to do business with us. Whereas, like, for example, if you're just selling a product, it's like, okay, well, you can come buy whatever you want to buy. I don't have to interact with you. Maybe now it's like, hey, is your product eco-friendly? You have to think about the ESG stuff. But I really, when it comes down to it, you can find that information out quickly. But when it comes to giving someone access to the financial state of your business and trusting them to help guide you, give you insight, trust that they have your best interest, trust that they're doing what's best for you. I think whenever it comes to offering service-based support, but specifically in accounting, I think trust is so critical for us, not just internally, but I think also with our customers. So it's really something that I think can really make or break the relationship. And just like in the personal side, I think also business is a critical factor.
Absolutely. And you know what's interesting is, when I had previously thought about, this being a conversation we would have as kind of a leadership discussion that we would then make available to the rest of the team. One of the
Mhm.
things, trying to think about some examples, and one of the things that happened today, which was unexpected, is I had a call from one of the partnering companies that we work with. So another accounting firm we do some outsourced work with. I was talking to her today because I had to fill in for her on some stuff for a client that we're doing some joint venture work on. And part of the reason I had to fill in is because she had to have a whole IT revamp, because apparently for a lot of there were several clients that use QuickBooks Payroll and that use like QuickBooks Bill Pay, where
Mhm.
apparently there was a hack that happened today, or
I
it
didn't know
happened
that.
yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And so what happened is I guess there's some type of code that went in that hacked it, so it changed the direct deposit on people's payroll to this fictitious account.
Oh,
So,
no.
she, all day she's been working on that, reaching out to clients and stuff. And it's one of those things for me that makes me think about, like, part of the reason, one of the reasons why we do really need trust with our clients is because there will be some stuff that happens that's outside of our control.
Hmm.
And the first thing, like, if we don't have trust with the client, and let's say something like that happened, there was a data breach, we don't have trust with the client. First thing they're going to be thinking is, well, your accounting firm, your employees, you guys took
You
my
did
money.
this. Right,
But
exactly.
if we have trust with them, because that was something that could have happened like last year. There was a client of ours who had some fraudulent checks cashed against one of their business accounts. And
Hmm.
so one of the first questions he asked was, he was like, hey, is it anybody, have you checked with your team, in the Philippines and stuff? And I was like, well, one of the critical things that I emphasize whenever we go through onboarding is we only have view only access to all of your accounts. So there's no
Hmm.
way for us to trigger something like that. And I think something simple like that it starts that journey of creating trust, to where
Hmm.
we're letting them know, hey, we're coming in. We want you to put us in a position where we only have view only access,
Right.
because we don't want to create any doubt or distrust about what we're doing with your money. We can only view it so we can do what we need to do. And I'm finding that doing simple things like that allow
Hmm.
you to build up that trust balance. So if something
Yeah.
happens, we can cash in on, like, hey, we built up enough trust to where, hey, this isn't us, but we're going to get in there. We're going to work with you to make sure we resolve this issue.
Yeah, and I think honestly, when I think about it, one of the points that you made about trust when you talked about just things like the example that you gave about the fraudulent checks and hey instituting that communication ahead of time to say hey when you give us access only give us view only. I think communication is such a big factor because I think when you have ambiguity in a situation it forces people to almost fill in the gaps when they're not getting information from you. So like for example in that circumstance where like let's say he'd reached out and he'd been like hey like are these fraudulent checks are they being done or were they created by someone that is in the Philippines? If you had taken 2 days to respond, that would have built more uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
That would have built more like concern. And so I think communication of just updating, like, for example, even when I think about us personally, just like, hey, I said I was going to be here at 7. It's 8. It's 7. It's almost 7 o'clock. Hey, I'm updating you and communicating you. Hey, I was delayed. Hey, I'll be there at 8. Or hey, 8 o'clock is around the corner. I was delayed. I'll be there 8:30. But because I think sometimes when you don't communicate, or you don't, yeah, when you don't communicate, sometimes people are forced to fill in the gap. And when they're forced to fill in the gap, then your imagination kind of runs wild. And I think that's why it's so important to, and this is something I've learned from you, is just over communicate, because sometimes when you don't do that, then it leaves people's room to kind of fill in the gap with their imagination. And sometimes that imagination isn't a positive thing. And so it just leads even to fracture the trust. So I think communication is so key.
No, absolutely, absolutely, and I would say, we'll talk about a couple of things. I mean, that I think it's something we've recently come up with. Is a scorecard that I'm using for, I'm starting to use myself, as far as like,
Mhm.
hey, what are ways for you to build trust? And I think, you know one of the internal cultures that I really want to build more within the TL Turner Group and the Business Talk Library, and any other entity that we develop or get associated with, or JV, is that, is, I think a first cultural point is to never be offended if someone does not trust you, or someone says that they don't trust you,
Mhm.
is to not be offended by that, because trust is like a bank balance. I mean,
Right.
if you haven't made deposits, then you can't expect any money to be there when it's time to withdraw on it.
Right.
And
And
so, oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, so I think that being a cornerstone within our company culture is just, how do we start in instilling that understanding that, hey, trust is like a bank balance. If
Mhm.
we have to be consistently making deposits, so that, hey, when things come up that are outside of our control, or when things come up that are within our control, that we have enough in our trust bank balance to be able to cover that, to where we don't lose all credibility with our clients, or we don't lose all credibility with our coworkers and our peers.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think that point about trust being built up over time, I think, is key. Even when I think about it on the marketing side, I think that's why you have to have multiple touch points with people before they're even interested in buying your product, right? Or buying your service. So it all comes down to, they need to what is it? They need to know you, they need to like you, they need to trust you. And so I mean, it's key in every area. So I definitely agree, like not taking it personal, when someone's like, well, I don't trust that what you're telling me is what you're telling me. Um, I think for me, my view is when you start out with people who are skeptical, like once you buy them in, or once they're bought in and they trust you, then they really, like, people are fully committed to it, versus people who are like, well, I'm just going to jump all in and I'm just going to be committed and I trust you. And it's like, do you really though? Like, do you fully, is that a legitimate statement? And so I agree. I agree. I think it's something that you should never take personal when people are dubious. But
Yeah.
any other points?
I mean, I think for me, that one is an interesting one. I think, as a leader, because I think this is a dynamic that, we have to figure out. Like, now that the team's expanding, and you have, an employee that's reporting to you, and there are more people in the organization other than just you and I think
Yeah.
it's a dynamic, I think, that you may have to figure out and navigate, is because I think sometimes, like, as an employer, or as the manager, or as a leader, when you hire people, for some reason, people come in the door and just have this sense of, well, because Terrell hired me, he fully trusts me. And I'm like, I really think that's a misconception. Now, I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but I think that's a misconception, because I'm just like, when I think about it, is, if you come into the door just because you've been hired, that doesn't necessarily mean, like, you have full trust. Now, there may be enough trust to give you a shot to
Hmm.
do, at an attempt to do the job, but there's
Hmm.
still that trust that has to be built, because it's one of those things that I think that, what we should be asking, or what I think everybody should be asking, and even for myself, like, even as being the leader, one of the things that I ask myself, like with the people that we're hiring, is just like, hey, what have I done to earn their trust? Even though I'm the leader, and let's say, I may be approving, or signing off on their paychecks, I still need to earn their trust so they can trust me as a leader.
Yeah.
Because I think it's that two-way street.
You know what? I forget about even like signing the checks. One of the things that I realized is like, have you noticed, like, if you go back to your days in corporate America, when you started a new job, you were super excited about that job. You were like, man, like, you just had all this energy, excitement, the benefits, like the work from home or whatever it was that came with the gig, right? And then, like, even if I think about like larger companies where they're like, man, like America's best place to work, like, people, just amazing culture. And then you had situations where I feel like with employees, people start with a full tank of gas. Like they start, this is my perspective. I feel like people start fully trusting you, right? Like as a leader, like, hey, man, they're excited about the role. They come in, they're like ready to jump on board. And then gradually, as you start to, like, let's say, hey, you don't show up for a meeting one time. Okay, cool. Like, it's fine. I understand it happens. You don't show up for a meeting the second time. You don't communicate that you're showing up for the meeting. Like, over time, that trust that they came into the situation with has been built. And that was built is basically being chipped away at, and then over time it's like, all right, well, I don't really trust you anymore, and then you have employees that leave. So I think contrary to is just kind of putting myself in, like, that's one of the things I've had to think about is like, as we hire people, putting myself in their shoes, because I think, like, between us, like, for example, when we have meetings, like, we can be like, okay, hey, like, this is going on with a client, like, I need to move that meeting or whatever. And one of the things I'm going to be transparent and honest with myself about is, lately, like over the last couple of weeks, I've had this bad habit. And I don't know if it's just because of like the traveling. It's not really a habit. It's only happened 3 times. I don't know, but I've had this issue with between traveling and being on a different time zone, where I've been missing my one-on-one with my employee, to where like my teammate, so I forget, like I'll forget the time zone. I won't set a reminder, and so she'll ping me and be like, hey, John will ping me and be like, hey, Lola, like, I'm here, and I'm like, crap, like, dang, okay, sorry, I missed the meeting. And it's like, it's the same time every week. Like, why are you not making this a priority to show up and to be there regardless of whether you're traveling, or to communicate, hey, I'm traveling, I'm not going to be able to make it, let's reschedule it. So saying all that to say, like, I think putting yourself in the position of the employee, whereas as an employer, you're kind of like, well, you have to earn, I'm giving you, I have a limited amount of trust for you to do what I hired you to do, right? And then as you prove yourself, I'll give you more. But what I feel like is is a position we need to put ourselves in as employers is, for the employee, you're starting out with in some cases, a full tank of gas. And so everything that you do that discredits that trust or that chips away at that trust is going to eventually get them to a point where they're like, all right, well, I no longer trust you, and I no longer believe in what this company is about, so I'm leaving. And so I think being mindful of that is, I think there's oftentimes that struggle between the employer where, like, you need to earn my trust, and you need to show me that you're good to be here. But there's also the part of the employee, which is like, I trust you until you prove me otherwise. And then once you break my trust, I'm gone.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is very true, because I think that, if we don't take that into account, I mean,
Mhm.
from even as I'm thinking down the road for, let's say, as the company continues to grow and we continue to bring people on in leadership positions, it's one of those things that I want it to be understood very clearly by the leaders, is being a leader doesn't mean that everybody has to earn your trust.
Mhm.
Means you need to earn the trust of the people as well. It has to be
Right.
that two-way street. And I think, I like the things that you pointed to, because as I start thinking about like my scorecard, one of the things that I did is, I mean, just created a simple spreadsheet, and put all of the employees' names, in the left column. And there's like 5 things that I put on a list, like, hey, these are the things that I can do to, build trust, to make deposits into the trust bank account. Like, one of them is, hey, am I making commitments and holding myself accountable? Like, said that, hey, if we have a meeting, am I showing up for the meeting? Like, even as as I'm traveling, even as a CEO, it's just like, hey, am I showing up for the meetings?
Right.
Or two is, am I communicating when I'm not going to show up to the meetings?
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and then also, I think, for me is, am I thinking proactively about, what impacts, the people on the team? Like
Mhm.
when I'm thinking through, like one of the big things that I'm changing, like, when we got started at a smaller company, a lot of the work I was doing directly. So a lot of like the access rights and all that stuff went through my email, to where now I'm going through that process of transferring all that to a centralized email, because what was happening is, whenever the team needed to do work, they had to wait for me. They had to send
Yeah.
me a message. They had to wait for me. And if they're working in Philippine time, which is 12-hour difference, and I'm just like, you know what? How do I shift more authority into their hands?
Mhm.
And how do I show them that, hey, I believe in them more, and I'm letting go of a little bit more authority, to where it's one of those things that's starting to build trust. And I
Yeah.
do think the last thing is how do I hold them accountable? Because I
Mm.
think that one is a tough one, but I think the better I get at holding them accountable to the things that they committed to, they begin, like, for some strange reason, that has allowed more trust to be built. Because if I'm just like, hey, you told me you were going to have this to me by XYZ time, if I'm following up on it,
Mhm.
like, that has been something that's really been building a lot of trust, because
Yeah.
now they know, hey, he's going to be accountable to his word to me, and he expects me to be accountable to my word to him.
Right. No, I think that's good. And I think just it just shows also because I think again, it just goes back to uncertainty, right? Uncertainty is created when people don't communicate. So like for example, if we agreed, hey, you were gonna get this done by a certain time and you didn't get it done and I didn't follow up, then it's like, all right, like are you really gonna follow up? Or was that a loose deadline? Was that like, hey, let's just kind of see where it goes, let's see what you do. So I definitely think the coming back and holding the team accountable and even holding yourself accountable. And I think this has been such a big factor for me as a leader when I've admitted and apologized for being wrong, you know what I mean? Or not acted like, hey, sometimes like some of the things my team says is like, hey, I know you're really busy. It's okay. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm busy, but I knew this was happening. Or, hey, when I could tell 5 minutes before my meeting ended that I was probably going to need another 10 minutes, I didn't communicate that. That doesn't have anything to do with my inability to, that doesn't have anything to do with my busy schedule. It just is my lack of communication. So I think when you can take ownership and kind of admit when you drop the ball as a leader, it definitely helps. It builds that trust even more because I think sometimes when you have people in leadership positions, they always demand but are never willing to, or they often demand but are never willing to, concede and say, hey, you know what, I think I missed it here. So I think we are in a space now where, like, for our talent, where people have options, right?
Yeah.
People have options. And so the question is like, what are we doing differently to keep our employees happy, right? To help them feel challenged, but also to help them feel like, hey, they are somewhere where they trust the people that they work with. And they feel like, I would say this is the most important thing, they trust that you have their back. Like, I think that's also something that like is not really talked about often. But even when I think about like in one of the roles that I had where there was an employee that I had who was underpaid, just in terms of like the role that she took. And I know like had a conversation with her, and this was something that was a big concern for her coming into the role. And I was like, hey, like I can't promise anything. Again, honesty, right? Clear communication. I can't promise anything, but hey, these are the things I'm going to do to try to advocate and to get you the increase that you need and to see what happens. So clear, didn't make any unrealistic promises, didn't promise something and then not do it. And I would follow up with her and be like, hey, this is where this is, just so you know, for your awareness, this is what's happening. And then finally, when we got it approved, it was like, hey, went back and said, hey, can you let me know, make sure a review, let me know that the salary increase has hit. So that way, like the person knows, like, okay, it wasn't just a, hey, whatever. I understand and I recognize that this is important to you, and I'm following up because I have your back and I understand this is a life situation for you. So I think also the trust of you have my best interest. And I think when people feel that you have their best interest, they are more receptive when you challenge them, and they're more receptive when you hold them accountable to deliver on certain things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say as a final thing to kind of wrap up this leadership discussion, one of the things that I will say is I think I know one of the cultural points that I want to be instilled throughout the entire company, whether it's from, my relationship to the rest of the team, the team's relationship with each other, the team's relationship to me, our relationship to the clients, is that the thing that I want people to walk away saying is, hey, when I talk to so and so, or when I work with so and so, they do what they said they were going to do. They
Mhm.
deliver on what they said they were going to deliver on, or they proactively reach out to me and they let me know, hey, if something changes. Because I think when you are a person who is known to do what you say you are going to do, it just takes that trust level to a new to it increases the trust level, and it allows us to really start moving into doing some amazing, awesome things. So as we're figuring out like our marketing strategy, is making sure that, hey, the stuff we say in our marketing, we got to make sure we deliver on it.
Oh, yeah.
What we say in our contracts with our clients, make sure
Oh,
we
yeah.
deliver on it.
That's a big one.
What we say to our, our coworkers and the employees, what we say to our managers, make sure we deliver on what we said we were going to do. Because if we have trust in all of those areas, I think we're going to have a phenomenal organization.